Hello and welcome to New Game Plus. I'm Tim, I'm joined by Kirsty. How are you?
I'm feeling almost a little bit apprehensive, Timmy. We've got quite a few horror games featuring in this week's episode.
Yeah, we certainly do.
I don't know, I'm not a big horror game person. I really like Slender Man.
Okay.
That was, I don't know if that was horror, but that was scary.
Yeah.
That was really scary.
I don't know, some people really enjoy being terrified. I'm not one of them.
I don't watch a lot of horror movies. Yeah, I don't watch a lot of those, but I do appreciate a good fun game. So I can get into that kind of thing.
But we've got some more stuff later on in the episode as well, where we've got a retrospective of our Japan Film Festival that we went to last year.
Yes, we did. So we've got a couple of the movies we got to see there, having a bit of a flashback.
Yep.
Man, it was so much fun. I can't wait to go again, really.
Yep. And we've also got Don's Indie Wrap, so he's going to keep you apprised of all the new indie games, which ones are worth your while.
Which is really good at this point in time because we're a little bit quiet on a lot of the big releases. We're only just starting to edge into March. So, it's a time to hit up Steam, smash it in.
Yep, certainly coming up. And of course, follow up to New Game Plus's Game of the Year last year was The Last of Us Left Behind, the DLC. We'll be having a look at that later on in the episode as well.
Yeah, look, I don't know. It's such a
lots
sad
of
story.
expectations.
Yeah, I guess that's the hard thing is
it
it was just such a game that came out of nowhere, and then now it's better be a good sequel.
Yeah, better be. But first up, we've got our Outlast review.
Alright, let's start this review off with a question. What's cooler than being cool?
Ice Cold?
Actually, no, that's wrong. That's Outcast. What we're supposed to be talking about is Outlast, a game that came out on PC 6 months ago, and it's finally reared its ugly head on PlayStation Network. So you start off as a journalist called Miles who infiltrates a facility known as the Mount Massive Asylum. Unfortunately, things go a bit awry as he looks for a massive scoop. You find a lot of dead bodies in your wake, as well as some crazed madmen, and you're trying to find a way to escape. Yeah. So that's the gist of it. Anyway, let's get straight down to it. What do you think of the visuals?
It's a very pretty game. It's a lot of atmospheric kind of environmental. The character design's probably not that great. It didn't really implement it too well. I don't know.
I didn't mind the environments. The particle effects, fantastic, as well as the filter that's used as a primary game mechanic where it's pretty much night vision as you use a camera and you traverse around the environment. It's pretty dark. It's the only means of getting around.
With the camera, though, they use a lot of sepia effects and kind of like that, and it just does take it over too far for me a little bit.
Sometimes it does. I mean, it's a bare necessity though, because you have to actually traverse through this environment very sneakily, and you have to use your cunning to survive. It reeks of Clock Tower and games like Penumbra and Amnesia, where you actually got to hide from your enemies. Your only meaning of survival is hiding.
The music is done very, very well. It helps with the atmospheric kind of tension, as per se. It does it very well, except for a few parts where it's you know something's going to come, so it just kind of ruins the scare.
That's the one thing that gets me as well. Aside from the gameplay, there are a few scripted jump scares, and I mean, the game goes for some really strong foreboding at the start in the form of notes, blood smears, bodies everywhere, but then there's too many jump scares, and I think it ruins the atmospheric mood. It tries to go for this Silent Hill-esque mentality, and then it kind of falls a little bit flat in that regard.
If you are kind of a fan of the Amnesia, this is really a game for you. It's just a realistic version of Amnesia, I think.
You reckon?
Yeah.
No, well, I mean, you've got the camera mechanics, resource management. UI is a little bit basic, but it really strives for those environmental cues and ways of getting around and escaping. But it's a little rough around the edges, but I enjoyed it for what it was.
So, Outlast, horror game, very scary and stuff.
Yeah, I'm kind of weirded out by the whole run away, you can't fight.
Yeah.
And it's look, I can understand the appeal of it because you shouldn't always just turn around and fight because then you just die. Yeah. And it would turn into zombie
It needs to have that feel like you are helpless to help yourself, because with a horror game, if you're overpowered, if you have the ability to fight back, then it's less scary. And I don't know, it's really trying to go for that Amnesia vibe, and no, I wouldn't play it.
No, see, I'm not, again, as I said in the start, I'm not much of a horror player, and this seems to appeal to people who are interested in horror games and interested in the ways, that you can get scared as a gamer. And
there's a lot of jump scares as well, and jump scares are only jump scares if they happen periodically and not very often.
And not obviously either.
Yeah, it can't lead you on to the fact that you're going into a scary place and then something jumps out and it's I saw that coming. So, I don't know, some people enjoy it, some people might not.
Dumb ways to die, so many dumb ways to die. Now, one of the greatest things that really came out of Melbourne recently was Metro's ads Dumb Ways to Die, which was there to kind of promote train safety. And instead of doing the usual, don't go under the boom gates, which nobody seems to follow for some weird reason, they decided to do this really crazy cartoon and really good song just by saying, if you do all these things, you're just an idiot and you're going to die in really hilarious ways. And they actually had a mobile game that came out with it. And the game itself really emulates the ads really well. So the characters all look the same, the way they die is still the same, and the music is really fun and upbeat. So the way you play it is you literally do all the different ways that they die. So for some of them you have to swat away wasps, for some of them you have to swipe connect balloons to strings, other ones, you have to swat away piranhas. So there's a lot of different kinds of gameplay that happen in this game. And for the most part, it works really well. It actually works better on iPad than on iPhone. I actually found a couple of games, like once you get to the top where the notification bar comes down, the sensitivity stops. So particularly the spew cleaning one, I was never getting the top line of dirt cleaned off because the notification bar would activate and it just wouldn't work anymore. So I think that would have been mitigated in the iPad version simply because the screen is bigger and there's just more to be done with it. But otherwise, the games worked really nicely. The high scores worked really nicely. Everything was just so funny, so quirky, so cute. It's the perfect game to play on the train.
Punch, punch, punch! Give him the good! It's your time, man. Show him what you got, baby. 1, 2, keep it up, son. Jab, jab, hit him hard. Uppercut, body blow. Tear that armor up back. Don't flinch. Hit him, baby. Straight. Counter. All right. Smash him. The punch is mightier than the sword. You ain't no air fighter, man. Quit fooling around up there. Smash ain't no joke. All right. Shake it off, son. Build up the power meter. Down, man. Let it rip. The world's waiting for you, kid.
Recently we've been to the Japanese Film Festival, the JFF, and we covered a lot of films, so we thought we'd cover 2 more that we've seen.
Yes.
So the first one was The Devil's Path, which follows the story of, was it Fuji?
I think it was like Fuji, I think his name was.
Yeah.
He was a journalist in and around, I think it was in Tokyo or
Yeah,
Kyoto.
yeah.
And he gets a letter from a death row inmate
Yes.
called Junji. And he starts confessing to all these rather heinous crimes. And the reason that the journalist gets involved is because the guy who's actually the mastermind of these heinous crimes is walking around scot-free.
Yeah. So the whole idea is they follow back these murders, they follow all of these little clues that he gives and all these things he remembers and rah rah rah. So it kind of it goes how you would expect it to. Like it follows it is one of those based on a true story kind of deals. Like every Japanese movie, it goes for 2 hours.
It does, and there's a lot of kind of little harrowing stories. So the actual crimes themselves are done rather brutally, and they are demonstrated in the film.
Because it's Japan and they have no qualms about that.
And then there's also this kind of home violence going on at the same time.
Yeah, and just the way it cuts from current present day to the flashbacks, honestly it's a little bit disconcerting because it should
really
have been done in a block.
Well, they did. They somehow put all the flashbacks in the middle, which was really weird, and it was hard to tell time skips.
Yeah, so it was weird.
It was interesting and quite harrowing, but very oddly put together.
Yes, but it was still definitely an interesting film to see. And,
Absolutely.
It was worth the time. The other one, and I'm surprised that you came out of this not a blubbering mess.
And so was I have to say this. This is A Boy Called H, which is a light-hearted, yet of course, because it's Japanese, not very light-hearted movie about a really young boy called H as he went through World War II. Now, I have to say, I went into this very afraid that it was going to turn
Grave of the Fireflies.
Grave of the Fireflies.
Yeah.
His younger sister is a spitting image of the girl.
That was crazy.
Yeah, and look, the movie was nice, somewhat light-hearted. The ending was interesting because it actually demonstrated how Japan kind of became very modernized very quickly, but it was very odd. I don't know. Again, it was a great story of how a young boy kind of lives through the wars
Yeah.
and how life still goes on. But it was a little bit odd. The
Yeah.
ending really stuck out to me.
Yeah, it's one of those things. These were perhaps not the strongest films at the festival.
No.
But that said, they were definitely a good use of your 2+ hours. Because,
Yes.
Again.
And very beautiful films as well.
Now for this review, I thought I'd do things a little bit differently, wind down a bit, and enthrall myself in a visual novel called Banshee's Last Cry for the iOS. Now this is a localization, an English localization of a visual novel that came out in Japan 20 years ago for the Super Nintendo, and thankfully it's aged quite well for its for about 20 years. So it puts you in the shoes of a man as well as his female companion, and they get snowed in at a ski lodge. Adding a cryptic message as well as some serial murders, and situation gets quite dire very quickly. So visually there's not really much going for it. It's just a series of static imagery amidst a bunch of white text. Not a bad thing though, it's a visual novel, so basically it plays like a choose-your-own-adventure Goosebumps game. So you read a long passage of text and make particular choices throughout your journey, and that affects multiple endings and how good, bad, or silly your ending may be. Thankfully, there is a lot of them as well. So it encourages a lot of playthroughs. When you get through particular endings, you manage to get past conversation paths and branches that you normally wouldn't have got the first time. So it really does encourage you to keep going, and persevere on your quest to solve the murder mystery. Sounds convey a sense of dread as well, so there's some blood-curdling screams, the music is tense when it needs to be, as well as silly sometimes as well, depending on your ending. And it's really, the writing's fantastic for a localization. I mean, it was fantastic, it's aged well. I can't really say anything more, so just make sure you indulge yourself by turning off the lights, wrapping yourself up in a blanket, and just indulge in Banshee's Last Cry.
Welcome once again to the Indie Wrap. This time we're looking at swords and we're looking at... I'm not quite sure. First off, we have Nidhogg from developer Mark Essen. Nidhogg sees you engaging in a grand sword fight against an array of opponents. You kill one, another one takes his place, and vice versa. So your aim then is to run to the right of the screen, kill as many opponents as you can until you hit the end, upon which you get eaten by a giant snake, because Nidhogg. The controls here are rather simple. You can hold out your foil in a low, medium, or high stance to get around your opponent's blade. You can also jump, dive, kick, roll, and even throw your sword at your opponent. Sure, the controls are simple, but it means that more people can get into it, and that isn't to say there isn't any depth here. Because it's so simple, you still have this opportunity to engage in a range of aggressive or defensive strategies on the fly, and it's this simultaneous simplicity and depth that allows some really exciting matches. It just takes one well-placed lunge to get the advantage, and you often have these minutes-long bouts where you're just trading lives before that one person just manages to sneak through and reach the end, before they get a blade to the back of the head and the whole thing begins again. Now, Nidhogg absolutely shines in local multiplayer. The drama is enhanced by the fact that you can see your opponent. The only issues that I have against Nidhogg is that it doesn't quite have the all-night legs that, say, a Street Fighter or a Smash Brothers does, and there are only 4 maps here, so every match sort of visually blurs into one another. But Nidhogg is still an example that I can hold out as another argument for the qualities that you can only get from local multiplayer.
My heart is broken.
Up next, we have Jazzpunk from Necrophone Games. I'm not quite sure how to describe Jazzpunk. Maybe we can describe it as a sketch comedy barely disguised as an adventure game, because sure, you do have puzzles, and sure, you can rub things against other things to solve these puzzles, and there's even a thread of a narrative, but you're not coming to Jazzpunk to be enthralled or engaged with the gameplay on any level. No, you're coming to Jazzpunk for the fever dream comedy, and this can either be Jazzpunk's success or its failure. Depends ultimately on what you think about absurdist comedy. Sure, there are plenty of dumb jokes here and lots of slapstick, but these are just sandwiched by these bizarre moments like this one sequence where you're just dropped into a zombie survival horror, which turns into a Shining parody, except everything is made out of pizza. There is no logic or reason to Jazzpunk's comedy, and I kind of love it because of it. It's not afraid to commit to its goofs. They built out a rudimentary arena shooter, except you shoot out wedding cake and champagne, and this is all just to have a dumb wedding quake pun. You have to admire that. Having said that though, Jazzpunk isn't as consistently funny as I was hoping it to be. Maybe it was because I had a headache the entire time I was playing it. If you get nausea from playing first-person titles, then Jazzpunk will flare that up very quickly. But I grinned through the pain, and I really liked Jazzpunk just for being so strange.
I don't recognize your style for that.
That does it for another edition of the Indie Wrap. Tune in next time when I play something less, you know what, I'm not going to even try to promise anything less weird.
So after a brief period of pirates being the new black, I think we've hit back into ninjas being the new black.
When's the samurais coming back?
Yeah, well that's well then we'll move on to samurais after that, and then we'll move into Revolutionary Wars, and then continues. But anyway, Strider itself. Now, first things first, this game looks really pretty.
Yeah, lots of colours, and the combat looks really fast and flowing well. It looks like a really cool game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit partial to 2D kind of scrollers. I really like the whole idea. It's just a flat plane. But it looks like it's got some really interesting attacks as well. Like this deflection thing you had going on at one point. I don't know, like it looks really interesting to me.
And he rides a ghost tiger, which is cool. Well, Peter, Last of Us was a huge game of 2013.
The biggest game, one
Yep.
might say. So
Yeah, it certainly got a lot of praise from New Game Plus as well as other publications, and it certainly deserved it. But the long-awaited DLC is finally out, Left Behind, and we're both...
And I'm very happy it's not a multiplayer DLC. It adds to the story. It's great.
It's good seeing... Well, this is Ellie's story. When we play The Last of Us, it is Joel's story apart from a few chapters. So it's good to see something a bit different, I would say.
And it's good to fill in some gaps that were in the first release of the game with Ellie, like in the section that's covered in the DLC.
Yeah. So of course, focusing on Ellie, it is a prequel. Well, most of it is the prequel.
Yes.
It explores the relationship of Ellie and a friend of hers,
Riley.
before Joel and Ellie meet, of course, and
while she's still in like a school kind of environment where she's being trained
under the soldiers' rule and all that, and the Fireflies come in as well. And it's, I think when you compare the two experiences, The Last of Us was certainly more of a game, and this is certainly more of just Naughty Dog sitting you down and telling you a story.
Yes. Yeah, the gameplay has been, I suppose, simplified because it's not so much about the survival, it's more about the narrative and things like that.
Yeah.
So whereas The Last of Us was survival, like hunting for items and scavenging and that, there's less of this in this game.
Especially now that you don't have to make shivs because
Ellie
has
got
her
a
unbreakable switchblade, and while that does help in some respects, you do still feel...
It cheapens it a little bit.
Yeah. You're certainly weaker than Joel as like one versus one.
But that being
person.
said, Ellie can't wield like a big scissors on
a
steel
baseball
pipe
bat
or a
anything,
baseball bat or a hatchet.
So there are some
trade-offs.
Yeah. So I think obviously it's Naughty Dog, so it's a very cinematic experience.
And it looks beautiful.
It does.
Again, the quality is way up there.
It's all set in a mall, but 2 different seasons, so there's a good contrast.
Yeah.
And I think just the way that the story is told, it's a really good story, but it's only, well, what did you say, 90 minutes, 2 hours long?
Yeah.
Depending on how many mistakes you make or how hard the difficulty is as well.
It's a good story though to follow for those 90 minutes. You don't want to miss a second of the narrative.
Yeah, when you do look at the price though, you might think it's a bit expensive, but
it is Naughty Dog though.
Yes,
like, the quality is there. Like
if you enjoyed Last of Us story, you will definitely enjoy this story.
Yes.
While it's not so much a game, it is definitely an experience. Well, it was a really good follow-up to The Last of Us. It may not have been the game that Last of Us was, but it certainly held that storytelling.
But see, I think that's really important because, I mean, again, like we said at the start, Last of Us was a bit of a surprise hit.
Yeah.
You know, I guess people didn't expect it to be such a good game.
Coming out of Naughty Dog, like people were still expecting good game, but from a new IP, it was really coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah, exactly. And like the reason I liked Last of Us so much was it had that perfect balance of a fantastic story and fantastic gameplay.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see them further exploring the story and not stuffing it up because that's something that happens a lot.
And it really could have gone either way. They could have just gone no combat whatsoever, or they could have gone more combat focused. And there's the pros and cons of both, but I think they hit the right note with that balance that they had in the DLC.
Yeah, but it is recommended you should play The Last of Us before the DLC.
Even though it is a prequel, it does.
It's still, I think there's a bit of inferred knowledge still in that. But anyway, we digress.
We've got some exciting things next week.
Next
it's a very shadowy week.
Ooh, we should get our like hoods on, little peaks on them. Anyway, no, it's a very exciting week next week. We've got Thief and we've got
Castlevania Lords of Shadows 2.
Which is, oh man, I'm absolutely like really loving that game. I'm basically dreaming about it at night. So we'll have more about it next week. But Timmy, wrap it up.
So visit our website, www.newgameplus.tv.
Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/NewGamePlusTV.
And follow Twitter @NewGamePlusTV.
Thank you so much, Timmy, and we'll see you in the shadows of next week.